All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the informational webinar on the Acadia Science Fellowship. Um, I'm joined here today by Adam Gibson, who's with National Park Service, by Emma Albee, and Catherine Schmidt, both with Schoodic Institute. So we have some slides to share, a little bit of background on the fellowship, on the science in Acadia, and then there'll be a chance at the end for questions from you all. I will note today is September 11th, so thoughts go out to all those that were affected by the 2001 tragedy. All right, and I am going to hand it over right away to Adam to go through the next couple slides.
Great, thanks, Nick. Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Gibson. I'm the social scientist for Acadia National Park, and I'm also acting right now as the science coordinator for the park. And just to introduce you to the Park Service, for those of you that might not be that familiar with the National Park Service, just wanted to mention what the mission for the National Park Service is. And essentially, that is this dual mission of protecting resources, both cultural and natural resources, and also providing for experiences and enjoyment of those resources at the same time. And as we are fond of saying, the time scale that we operate on tends to be forever. We're in the forever business. And so whenever we're trying to preserve those resources, that's what we're thinking about and how we make decisions. And then if we want to think about the mission for Acadia National Park specifically, there are those things like ecological integrity, cultural history, and scenic beauty. But interestingly, Acadia is one of the few parks where science and scientific values are actually in the founding legislation for the park. So it's incredibly important that exists as a place to conduct science. And we work with a lot of different research partners, and we tend to have between 80 and 90 different research permits that are approved for across all different fields within the park that occur each year. Okay, I think I'll pass it back to you, Nick, to talk a little bit about the Schoodic Institute.
Great, thank you, Adam. Yeah, so Schoodic Institute, we are a partner organization. We are Acadia National Park's primary partner in science and education. So we're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to inspire science, learning, and community for a changing world. And so that really means, partnering in science, as Adam mentioned, there's a fabulous, thriving community of science in Acadia, and that's because of all the individuals and organizations working together to better understand and protect Acadia. And part of our role at Schoodic is to really extend and enhance the NPS capacity and expertise in science and science communication and science engagement, and make sure we're increasing the effectiveness of the science happening in Acadia and also communicating on this work. And as Adam mentioned, scientific values are in the park's purpose, and it's really, our work is helping to achieve the founder's original vision of Acadia as a destination for science and an inspiration for conservation. All right, so here's the outline for the talk today. We'll break it up into four parts here. First, we'll do a little overview on the fellowship. Then I'll hand it over to Adam to talk about science and resource management specific topics here in Acadia. Then we'll talk about what we're looking for fellows, and Emma will then help us understand how to apply now for this fellowship. All right, so starting off with the Acadia Science Fellowship. The goals of this are to support stewardship of park resources ultimately through science that informs management decision making. And then also, we believe there's no place better than national parks to engage people in science, to raise public understanding, awareness, support for science, and understanding how cherished places like Acadia are changing rapidly. So this fellowship will have 1 to 3 new fellowships awarded for 2026. Again, with the intent to inform park management, communicate science, and really hopefully build long-term relationships for careers doing science in national parks. And this communication piece, I think, is one of the really important components of this fellowship, something we take really seriously and provides some communication training. So Catherine Schmidt, who I mentioned at the beginning of the talk here, who is our science communication specialist and leads those trainings and is really an amazing science communicator that fellows are able to work with. And we work with you to figure out what's the best platforms for sharing your science. And we don't apply a one size fits all, but like to work with fellows, figure out what's the right platform that you want to work on as far as science communication goes. All right, who should apply? I would say you should apply. So we like to say we encourage early career scientists, graduate students, postdocs. We don't have a specific restriction on that, but that's an encouragement. We do need you to be legally in the country. And so we say here, U.S. resident, at least 18 years of age. On the, being in the U.S., you can be here legally through whichever visa is appropriate for your situation. As a small organization, Schoodic Institute is simply not able to provide assistance in obtaining the necessary visas and other documentation. And so really up to individual grantees to be able to already have the necessary authorizations. And then Emma, Adam, Catherine, and I are not eligible because we work for either Schoodic Institute or NPS. And that goes for anyone else at our two organizations. So we try to make the application process and requirements as straightforward as possible. And the RFP has all of the full details on what's required. And the awards are up to $30,000 per award. Grant duration is 1 to 3 years. We recognize, a lot of the field science that happens in Acadia takes a little bit of time for the planning, for the field's work, for the synthesis. And so we work with fellows to figure out what's the right time period for your project. Also, with this award amount, we also recognize that the fellowship may be part of a larger research project that you're working on, and thus the budget that you submit may just be for certain pieces of the project, and that you may have other sources of funding as well. You don't need to include housing in your budget. That's one piece. We do have overnight accommodations at Schoodic, which are available for fellows, for scientists, assuming that there is availability on campus. So you just have to work with us, but we try to make housing available. And then, of course, we ask you to make time for both communications training, but also working on the communications products as well. Evaluation criteria, I'd say overall are fairly straightforward: intellectual merit, ability to inform park management, interest in science communication, potential for long-term research. I think those the final 3 bullets there, are really valuable, really important pieces. I think this is what can separate, the top proposals from the rest of the pack. And so there's evaluation based again on these 5 criteria. Intellectual merit, of course, we want to see really solid proposals. I think the relevance to long-term stewardship, that's super key piece. I do want to emphasize that. I think that's what separates the great from the exceptional um, proposals and ultimately the funded proposals, making sure that there's real potential to inform resource management, that the topic is of management relevance to Acadia National Park. Just as an example, the boundary of Acadia National Park goes from the bottom of the low tide water line behind me here all the way up to the summits in the park. So Acadia doesn't manage open ocean. So research projects on whales, while they may have great intellectual merit, be fascinating, they may not be relevant to Acadia and thus would not compete well for this fund source. We do recognize that we have applicants at different stages of their careers, and we're not going to expect a graduate student to have the CV, and experience of an assistant professor. And so we certainly take that into account based on where you are in your career trajectory. So proposals are due the day before Halloween, so on October 30th. The important piece here, the reviews are by a panel. It's going to include individual scientists that are experts in your field, but it's going to include others, scientists and resource managers that may not be experts in your field. And so as you're crafting your proposal, you will want to think about that audience. And then we'll make award notifications in the spring. All right, with that, I will hand it over to Adam to talk about Acadia.
Great, thank you. So just to come back to that idea of parks being important places for science, I just really want to emphasize that as Nick was talking about the review of proposals and how what that would look like. He mentioned that 25% is related to the relevance of long-term stewardship, and that's where that's coming from, that importance of science. We really do use science-based, science-informed decision making in all of our resource management decisions in the park. So the work you propose, the work that these fellows carry out is really important to decision-making processes in the park. The national parks are these tellers of science narratives, and we really see ourselves as exemplars of using science in management. And as I'll talk about in just a minute, we are facing a number of different really significant changes and trying to adapt continuously in this process to those changes and trying to focus on these long-term ecological and cultural integrity dynamics in the changing future. So if we can go to the next slide, just thinking about some examples of challenges that the park faces uh, in topics, potential topics that could be covered in a proposal. So we are seeing a lot of impacts to our plant communities, um, seeing reductions in plant communities and elimination of a lot of them, and we're seeing a lot of issues from invasive plants like purple loosestrife that's in the photo there with the monarch butterfly on it. We're seeing impacts from diseases for example, tick-borne illnesses such as Lyme disease, white nose syndrome, avian influenza, impacts to bird communities, impacts to air quality and water quality, increase impacts from changing climate, such as storms, like you're seeing there on damages to park infrastructure as well as resources. And we also have communities that whose livelihoods are based on if not ecosystems that exist in the park that are connected ecologically to systems in the park, such as harvesting of shellfish and of aquatic worms. And then lastly, there are impacts related to changes in visitation. The Park Service as the whole is seeing huge changes in visitation, and Acadia specifically has seen a large rise in the last decade, and then even in the last few years since 2020, since the pandemic, we've seen dramatic changes in visitation, and that can change how we manage different ecosystems and how we respond to. And then, me being the social scientist, I'm going to stick with that a little bit. And thinking about all of these issues, there's also a social component to those that could be considered as well. So, in thinking about how the park approaches management and science, it used to be that we, again, like I mentioned, we were in this forever business, and we would think about how to shift or how to keep things as they were, at whatever time scale you wanted to choose. But now we're thinking more broadly about socio-ecological systems and how they connect and how they're changing. And so we have this adaptive management process where we plan and do and learn, and it is this iterative and cyclic process. And that goes very well with science because science builds on its on previous research and helps us to change in this dynamic world. And we also, I'm not, if not sure how familiar you are with Acadia, but if you have ever visited Acadia, you would realize that it's a very unique national park and that we're integrated very closely with surrounding communities. It's a very porous park. It doesn't have particularly well-defined borders, to be honest. And so it's very difficult for some visitors to understand when they're inside and outside of the park. And the way that affects our management is that it requires us to engage really closely with communities and with partners, and that carries over into how we conduct science and how we manage the park. So we do engage a lot of community partners and do a lot of collaborative work, not only with organizations like the Schoodic Institute, but with our town communities as well. And a specific example of that is our work. We call it co-stewardship with Wabanaki nations, which are the native peoples in this region. So that partnership is very important to us as well. I wanted to mention that another good place to find information about potential topic areas would be the resource stewardship strategy. This is a, excuse me, this is a dynamic document that was created that really summarizes some of the resource issues in the park. Well, it should be all the resource issues in the park, and not only outlines what those look like, but what some of the strategies for addressing them might be, and even prioritizes them. And if you look at the address at the bottom of the slide there, yeah, at irma.gov. So IRMA is the Integrated Resource Management Applications. So there's a whole host of different resources that you could find there as well. There's the data store, there's information on visitation statistics, there's air and water quality information, there's also research permitting information. So I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with that website, to go and check that out as well. It's a great resource. All right, I'll pass it back to Nick.
All right, thank you, Adam. All right, what are we looking for? All right, so as we've sort of mentioned, successful proposals, right? This real potentially increase understanding of and inform responses to change in Acadia, and again addressing really priority needs. And as Adam said, the resource stewardship strategy is a good place to find information on what those needs are. Certainly, a proposal needs to be, cost effective, reasonable, and achievable in scope, given the frame of this fellowship program, where these projects are going to just be 1 or 2 year projects typically. Um, and then, we definitely want evidence that the applicant's committed to connecting their research both to management, as we talked about, but also communicating to a variety of audiences. We don't expect the fellows to be experts already in communication coming into the fellowship program. There is opportunity for training as part of the fellowship. What we really want to just see is that there's a real interest in sharing science with a variety of audiences. And we have now 10 years of fellows going back to 2016 and the start of the Second Century Stewardship Fellowship Program, which 2 years ago evolved into the Acadia Science Fellowship. But you can go to both on the Schoodic Institute website, you can find the Acadia Science Fellowship, and you can go to scsparkscience.org and see past fellows and the types of projects that they're working on. One other piece, because this is a national park, you will have to have a research permit, and there'll be some other requirements. That is true for all research projects happening in Acadia. And we can provide some help and guidance just in navigating the research permitting process, which we think is actually pretty efficient and easy to work through. And Emma Albee, who you'll hear from in a minute, helps to manage the research permitting process. Um, And then another piece is, mentors. We want to make sure that fellows are really integrated into the community of science here in Acadia and working with park staff, maybe resource management staff, other managers, and also other scientists working in Acadia. And part of that is just really to help with refinement of the project, that it really matches the opportunities and needs that exist. And then ultimately to help inform management. And then education and communication, again, experts will really help with that. We think for your fellowship, you should plan roughly 80 hours of education and or communication related activities. This could be a citizen science component to a project. It could be working with interpretive park rangers to help them integrate science into their programs. It could be creating videos, social media, or other types of communications. And there will be a communication training at the beginning of the fellowship. Typically, that's in early summer of 2026. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Emma.
So this, I'll go over the application process. So proposals are submitted online. So if you go to Schoodic Institute's website and then go to the Acadia Science Fellowship page, that page has a lot of information. So it has a link to this portal, which is where you'll submit your applications. It has a link to the RFP. It will have the link to the recording of this webinar once that is posted, probably next week. And so when you go to the portal, this is a screenshot of it. Nick, you can go to the next slide. And so the process with the portal is you have to register and make an account. And then once you log in, you can start creating your application, which you will have to enter some of the information just in like text boxes, like the title of your project, all of your information, and then attach some of the documents as well. And that's all listed in the RFP. And you can save it throughout the process. And then once you are ready to submit your application, you can hit submit, and then that will be done. And if you see on the right side of the screen, there's a resources box. And so that has the Schoodic Institute webpage. It also has a link to the RFP as well as the resource stewardship summary that Adam was mentioning. So that's another place to get some information. And then below that in the contact us is the email that we use. So if you have any questions about the fellowship, please submit them to that email. And then I check the email and either I will answer it or I'll forward it to whoever can answer it. So if you have any questions about the fellowship in general, the application process, anything like that, please reach out to that email. And this slide has a couple of the websites listed that can be helpful. And they're also all found on that webpage, it's in the signature of the email that had the information about this webinar. So if you're looking for that, you can find it there, or you can just go to the Schoodic Institute website and find it on there as well. And now for questions. So I think if you want to, you could raise your hand if you have questions or enter them in the chat. I don't know if we've had any questions that have come in.
I think while folks are putting questions in the chat, I'll just reinforce the irma.mps.gov is a valuable website where one, you can find the resource stewardship strategy, but also past science projects in Acadia. We definitely want to see that applicants have done their homework on the research happening here and that they're building upon 140 years of science that's happened in Acadia and since before it was even a national park. There's one question in the chat about working with cultural sites. Maybe Adam, if you want to answer that. What are the extra application requirements for working with cultural sites?
Sure. I think my answer would be it depends. So let's you can just contact me and we can work together with our cultural resource manager and figure out kind of what your needs are, what you're looking at, and then we can go from there. Hopefully that's helpful.
I think Valerie.
Hello. My question was related to mentorship. It says that a mentor will be assigned or paired to support the project. Are they national park staff or are they anyone kind of affiliated with the park? My research kind of uses community partners as well as park inside the park, but it has a large community component. So I was just curious about how the mentors are paired with the programs.
Yeah, it's really based on each individual project, what the best match is for that. So it could be a Schoodic Institute scientist, it could be the vegetation manager for the park, it could be the wildlife biologist at the park, it could be somebody at another partner organization or in the community as well. So we certainly are open to working with the individual fellows to make sure that the match is right on that. Let's see, the next question from Michelle. I think this is probably Adam for you. In the resource stewardship strategy, impacts to coastal marine mammals are mentioned. So would working with pinnipeds who haul out on Acadia shorelines be considered?
That is an excellent question. I would say yes. I think as long as your research is focused on when they're actually on shore. I'm not sure though if you're thinking about trying to do data collection, more in the marine environment from a boat. So again, I think it would depend, and we can we could also chat offline about that.
Great, lots of good questions coming in. I'm trying to stay on top of these. And Emma or Catherine, you can help me if I miss one. Question on are social and natural science projects weighed equally? Are you looking for both? And are there recommendation letters required as part of the application process? Um, so on the first one, yes. Yeah, natural science, social science projects are both considered as part of this. I think the relevance to park stewardship, is what's really important for both. Adam, anything you'd want to add to that as our social scientist?
No, no, that's what I would say as well.
Great. And then Emma, are there recommendation letters required?
No, we do ask for references. So that will be something that you fill out that We may check if it gets down to that,
Right,
but we don't, nothing else in the application process.
right, okay. Right, so we do ask for reference individuals' contact info, but not for letters. Great. Um, okay, could a PI apply for this to recruit and fund a graduate student, or the P insects for part of the field? That just froze. I don't know if I just got kicked off or what happened.
Yeah, it was being weird. I can hear you now, Nick. Can you hear me?
I can,
Okay.
yes. Okay. So yes, you can have, with the budget, recognize that it may be part of a bigger project, or that you want to support a student, whether a graduate student or even multiple undergraduates, field assistants, etc. That's all viable as far as the budget goes. Let's see. I think the next question, I think, is the one from Kate. Do ethics additional applications need to be filed before application submission? And can ethics applications go through Schoodic, or does it need to be through our home institutions? Emma, do you have an answer on that one?
So are you talking about like a IRB approval for your research?
Hi, yes, that's what I was wondering about.
Okay, yeah, so when you apply for a research permit, which is part of this process, that's when we'll need all the other permits that you need or approvals that you'll have in order for the project to move forward, for the permit to be approved. So you don't need it for this application process, but you will eventually need it, and it's always good to get going on those because sometimes that can take time. And for the park, the research permit is kind of the last step in saying, okay, now you can go ahead and do your work. You need like IRB, or if you're working with vertebrates, you need IACUC approval or things like that before we approve your research permit.
Sounds good. And my home institution is not in the US, although I am American, and I am wondering, that's what I was asking about. Can I apply for like IRB through Schoodic, if they're the ones connected to this grant program, or should I apply for that through my home institution? Just as an example. Thanks.
Usually that would be done through your home institution because Schoodic does not have an IRB, anything like that.
Great. Yeah, good questions on that. And thanks, Catherine, for following up on the question in the chat when we got cut offline there for just a moment.
Yeah, did you see there's another question about funding undergraduate students?
Let's see. Oh, could the funds be used to support undergraduate research assistants? The answer is yes on that, absolutely, and that definitely has happened before. That we've had multiple undergraduates helping out with projects, and which is great. If this is an opportunity to bring, if you're a professor, bring students, whether they're graduate students or undergraduate students, as part of the project. That certainly could be part of the budget. Let's see. There was a question on, does funding go to the individual or the institution? It can be either on that. often it goes through the institution. It can go to individuals directly. You have to then just manage tax implications on that, but that is also possible to go to individuals. We also recognize sometimes people are sort of transitioning between jobs or graduating and starting a postdoc, and so we've had individuals where the first installment went to one institute and then the next but Michelle, please.
Following up on that question, if it goes to the institution, is there overhead or is there an overhead cap since it's a fellowship?
We write in the RFP we request that there's no overhead drawn on the fellowship.
So hopefully that answers the question from Dorothy about whether she asked, do you need to be affiliated with affiliated with an institution to be a fellow?
Yeah, and the answer is no. You
Right.
don't necessarily need to be. Well, great. Appreciate all the questions. We'll give just a moment here if anyone else has another one. But do reach out to us, the AS Fellow at SchoolInstitute.org. We're happy to answer questions, and Emma's great at knowing who to send questions to for follow-ups. Great. Well, thanks all for joining us today. And again, this will get posted next week on the Acadia Science Fellowship page. There'll be a link to it on our SchoolInstitute.org website. Thanks all for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day.